Yeah, so I actually found, like, when I was reading through these questions, I found this question more difficult than I thought. um, Mostly, like, what comes to mind first is that it really isn't an easy question for a lot of people. And, like, I wanted to kind of acknowledge that. And for me, it isn't that difficult. And I've never really had to give it much thought. I haven't had to grapple with anything. I'm like, cis female, straight, white, middle class. It all just kind of like was what it was, and I didn't have to figure it out. But I know that it can be not such a straightforward question, and that's totally fine. Um, I guess I also would usually be considered an environmentalist. Um, that word I don't think totally captures what I am, but it's a word that a lot of people know and understand, so that's fine. Um, I guess a more broader term would be some sort of advocate for life in general, um, trying to make things better overall, climate change being a big aspect of that. Um, and I'm also an engineer, but I think even that word can mean different things to different people. And even in my class, what I feel about being an engineer might be different from what one of my classmates feels. So yeah, that's how I would identify myself very broadly. So I studied mechanical engineering, and I'm not too long out. I only graduated last year, so I've been working for a year. Even within mechanical engineering, there are different streams. So I did thermofluids, which basically means, well, it stands for like thermodynamics and fluids, and that just means focus on the study of how heat moves around, it's the thermo part, and how we move fluids around. So just for some context, that's compared to like materials engineering, which is focused on like metals and how you make stuff out of that, or how you make things out of glass, or how you make things, structures, or machines. Or mechatronics engineering, which includes some of the electrical stuff, how you use electronics to make things move. And another one, like there's petroleum engineering, which is just focused basically on oil and gas production, the mechanical side of that. So there's lots of different things, even within mechanical. So I did the thermofluid stream, and basically the output of that, what you would typically do is like HVAC stuff, so heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, because that has to do with heat and fluids, air, water, things like that, heat exchangers. We also do like piping systems, so like how you get your water from a well or the town treatment plant or whatever. And any manufacturing processes have a lot of mechanical components, the machines that make stuff. And another thing, but it also can be tied to other disciplines like electrical. For example, we did some of my courses did work regarding cooling of electronics. So anyone with a laptop, or even a phone, you can tell it gets hot a lot of the time when you're doing stuff. So we did problems where we'd have to figure out what you could put on there to help it cool down faster, that kind of thing. Because that's a big, especially for big like data centers and stuff, keeping everything cool is important. So all the heat transfer aspects of things is what I studied. Not that I'm necessarily applying that now, but it is still something I'm interested in, and it does come up. So right now I am, my title is Climate Change Mitigation Coordinator. So I don't need to be an engineer to do my job. Like my coworker is, like, she did earth sciences, which might sound more relevant on the surface to what we're doing, but that's okay. I did engineering because I thought it was a way to get into some sort of space where I could work toward climate solutions. So originally I thought, oh, like wind energy, solar energy, and that's true, like I could do that stuff. But the opportunity that presented itself immediately was not on the technical side of those things. So I'm not like building solar panels, but helping people to install them. So to me, that's just as good, maybe even more important, because the technologies are there. We don't need to make them again. They're pretty good. Like, they keep getting better, but they're good as they are. We just need to start putting things in place as soon as possible and at as large a scale as possible. So that's why I am happy where I am. And the fact that I do have an engineering background helps. So I do understand what I'm looking at. If I have to read specifications or something, I know what stuff means. So that it is important. And I think it does give me an advantage in that way. And of course, I'm still using the general like critical thinking the processes that they teach you in engineering school. So in terms of my career, it's only a year old, but you kind of start to build it before that in the engineering program because of work terms. So I did try to steer myself in this direction anyway, and I think I have notes about that later on in the question, so I'll get to a detail about that later. Well, another thing that is listed in this question is what types of equipment and stuff that I would use. And in my job right now, I just use a laptop and Excel. That's all I have been doing lately. Working from home, I don't have access to much else. But in school, I did use some different modeling software, which is quite fun. SolidWorks is cool. It's like the mechanical program where you basically design components of things and you can stick them together and model how they move and stuff. And that is really fun. I do like that. There's also programs for heat transfer specifically, so you can model, I don't know, like a greenhouse and show how it would heat up over the day and cool down at night, and what, if you needed it to maintain a certain temperature, you figure out what kind of heat pump you need for that. So that kind of stuff. So in my current position, I do sort of miss the technical side a little bit, because that is fun, and you dedicate so much time to learning those things that it feels a bit weird not to use them, but it's also more likely to not use them. Like when engineers get jobs, there are only so many jobs available, and you take what you can get for one. Not that I just took what I could get. I do like my job and I wanted it, but not everyone has the opportunity to do actual design work and apply directly, like the technical stuff that you learned. A lot of it is project management and things like that. So it's not unusual to not be like doing crazy engineering, sciencey stuff all the time. But it would be nice to do it now and again. So, but I'm sure there will be opportunities for that sometime also in my role. The thing also with my job and most of the jobs I've had is that my coworkers are my friends, because I've been working for small companies. So it's kind of, I guess, different than how a lot of people might experience work. But also I feel like I'm just kind of even as a person. So like when I thought of this question, I thought, well, there could be that, CEO person who is, so professional and strict during the day, but then is a, party animal at night. And like, I'm nothing like that at all. I'm kind of the same all the time. I'm quite introverted, high functioning introvert, I've been called. So like, I don't mind doing this type of thing. I can speak publicly if I have to, but I would prefer never to call anyone on the phone, ever, that kind of thing. So, and I think that comes across both in work and with my friends. Generally kind of quiet if I have the choice. And the main, I guess, skill that I bring to work would be critical thinking, or just could also be termed being analytical. But in my personal life, that just means overthinking, pretty much. So at work, it's typically a good thing. Like if we're thinking about a new project, for example, I usually think of all the possible things that could go wrong before we jump in too far. And I like my attention to detail is pretty good, so I can pick up mistakes and things pretty easily, and I enjoy doing that. So I just like to really dive into the details of things, but that can become more problematic when I don't need to do that for just like an unimportant personal thing. But it does come in handy sometimes. And yeah, I think that comes across for both my coworkers and my friends. And I've always had like a leadership role all throughout school. And in work, I sort of do too. Like, even though so far I've been a junior staff member, I kind of can't help but say when I think something should be different. So I guess in a friend situation, you don't usually have to like take the lead over someone else in a fun, situation. But if there is a decision to be made, I usually just do it. So I guess that kind of comes across as well. And when I asked my my past coworkers and friends, they basically said those things, but that some of these things, they do come across more in a work setting. So now that they know me in both cases, I guess maybe they wouldn't have realized the attention to detail that I have if I hadn't been actually exercising that relating to something technical. But in general, it's not a personality trait that comes and goes. It's pretty consistent. So I didn't really have an aha moment when I knew I wanted to do engineering. I don't really even remember what happened. But one key thing was that I went to MedQuest. I forget who puts that off. There's a program here at MUN where in junior high or high school, I don't remember, you sign up and you can do a little program at MUN in the hospital that shows you like what it's like to work in medicine, which is what I had been thinking. I don't really know why I was thinking that. Like, I played doctor when I was little, and it just seemed like the thing to do. Like, people with good grades, you're a doctor. That's what you do. But it was mostly after MedQuest that I realized, nope, do not want to do that, which I think is just as beneficial an outcome as those who went and confirmed their hunch that they wanted to do medicine. Both, I think, are very important outcomes. But I also realized, along with just that experience, thinking about it more, I realized how people-y medicine was, and that it was going to be too much for me. So like, I would not make it as a family doctor. It's just way too much small talk, and like just constant like new person, and I would be exhausted. So I thought of ways around that in medicine. Like, you can do things in labs, you can do things that are less, right up there with the public. So I thought about pathology. And one of the other reasons for that is because there was a show on TLC years ago called Dr. G, Medical Examiner. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I watched it all the time. She did autopsies and stuff, so it was like also made a cool kind of mystery, right? And I thought, ooh, pathology, it's like surgery, but they're already dead, so you can't kill them. I thought that was great. Like, you can't really mess up too bad. But anyway, that takes a long time to do in school also, because you still have to do regular medicine and then all these specialties and residency and whatever. So I wasn't really up for that either. So after MedQuest and realizing that, engineering just, I don't know, came to me as a good fit. It's still science-based, so I knew I liked the sciences. I did all of them in high school, so biology, physics, chemistry. And liked them all. So I knew that engineering was like heavily science-based, but there was also a creative aspect to it, which I liked. So there's a lot of like design of products or devices or even systems that just require creativity. So I thought that was cool. I've always had that side of myself as well. I've done some artsy sorts of things. And I realized that in medicine, there really isn't any room for creativity. You can't decide that you're going to try this medicine for this thing that people haven't done before. Like, you don't do that unless you're, in a lab doing tests. So they're really, you just kind of have to know what you're doing and do it. So I liked the freedom that engineering had in that way. And there were just so many fields you can go into. And I don't know if I really even understood that when I chose engineering. It kind of became apparent as you go through. But it just seems so broad. And I really did see it as that pathway toward addressing climate change. Whereas I know medicine is important, and will continue to be important because we're going to see health impacts related to climate change, but that's not the side I wanted to be on. We need people there. But I was more interested in preventing the impacts in the first place. So I really wanted to be on the renewable energy side and implementing some of these solutions. In terms of obstacles, they're really, like, I feel like I've been quite privileged in that way. Like I live in Newfoundland, so like I could live at home. I didn't have to pay rent or live on residence. I'm not an international student, so I don't have all these extra fees and, you know, language barriers and things like that. And like I had a quiet, safe place to study. I had transportation to and from school. Like none of that was an issue. So I was lucky in that way. I had a full scholarship. So, but that, like that, I'm not going to say it was lucky because I worked way too hard in high school. So I did earn that. But it really helped. So I didn't even have to worry about the money part. So in terms of those kinds of obstacles, didn't have any. And I did have, like, throughout school's not easy. Engineering is not easy. So there were some moments of anxiety, some weeks of insomnia that you just get through. You know, only one exam did I ever throw up before I wrote it. But that was only one time. That wasn't bad. So there is that, a little bit of anxiety to deal with. And there was one obstacle whereby, so you always think of like the worst case scenario before exams. And you know, like I thought about this all through my whole program. Like, what if like something happens on the way to an exam and I like miss it? Just like one of those like what if scenarios. Anyway, I was on the way to a final exam. It was in like term 7 or something, like pretty far along, and got hit in my car. I was like, okay, this is great. Like this is you know, perfect. What I always thought would happen. But anyway, so that was in that moment I really wasn't sure what to do because I was so ready for this exam and I was so done with studying. Like I could not look at that anymore. So I wrote it anyway. So that's also kind of a proud moment, I guess. I wasn't like seriously hurt or anything. It only hurt like the next week. It took a while to set in. So at that time I was just kind of shaken and like ran in there late. But that was an obstacle for sure, and had to make a decision in that time whether or not I wanted to defer my exam until after Christmas or whatever time. And anyway, I'm glad I wrote it. It actually ended up being my highest mark that term. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with myself there. The other thing I have noted here in terms of my path, one thing that did change my mind in the middle. So I chose engineering, went to MUN. I didn't even consider other universities. I don't even really know why. I was just like, oh, MUN is fine and I'll live home and save money and it's fine. And I'll get into MUN. Like it's not that hard to get into MUN. So I didn't really have any of that to think about to choose a school or anything. But when we had to choose our discipline, so whether you do mechanical or civil or electrical or computer, my plan from high school was to do process engineering, which is basically chemical. They call it chemical everywhere else in the world. We call it process because it's focused on the processing of materials pretty much. So like raw materials. So not just chemical engineering, more so like doing stuff with the chemicals that you already have, I guess. But in process, we're wondering how do we get like this mineral out of the ground and then use it for something. What's the process for that? So it's often related to oil and gas, but it could be related to anything else, iron or nickel or whatever. or it could be related to processes that aren't dealing with like such raw materials, but like a processing plant for anything, like for food manufacturing or whatever. So anyway, I was thinking about that at first, and there was a certain time in your program where you have to submit, like you rank your top whatever, like process, mechanical, civil in this order, and they'll sort you into a stream. And it was like the day before I had to submit it, and I switched to mechanical. So that was one change that happened, and I'm quite glad that I did what I did, that I changed my mind. And the reason I changed my mind was that I was looking at the details of the program. So if I went into this stream, like what courses would I be taking and what projects would I be doing? And when I was looking at the mechanical one, it just seemed so much cooler. Like you make an airplane and fly it. Like I wanted to build an airplane. I didn't want to like make a process map of a manufacturing facility on paper. Like I wanted to build stuff. So that's the main reason I chose mechanical, but it's also known as like the most general type of engineering. So if you do mechanical, I could do a more processy job if I wanted to. I could learn a little bit more electrical and do something more electrical, not like as much as an electrical person, but you have a little taste of kind of all of them, more so than some of the other streams. So that's why I did that. And yeah, that was the big path change that I saw. I think this is the main thing I wanted to do, was to make my career path meaningful. Because in a lot of cases it isn't. People just focus on what will make me the most money. Okay, I'll do that. But I never really thought about that. I'd like to, live in a house and things, but a small house is fine. I never really thought about that. When I chose this, I just chose what I thought I would enjoy and what could help me to contribute to the problems that I wanted to be solving. So, and I think that's exactly where I am. The purpose of the company that I'm with is to make things better. That's basically all we're doing. So it's a consulting company. So it wouldn't even really be called an engineering firm. We aren't doing the engineering design for the most part when it comes to the projects that we're promoting and helping people with. But it's meaningful because we're helping to initiate these actions that we believe should be happening or should have been happening years ago. So we're focusing on basically anything climate change related, mitigation and adaptation. And those two words are used a lot. Not a lot of people know what they mean really, but mitigation basically means prevention, or trying to prevent impacts from happening, trying to make the problem less bad. And really the only way to do that is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's my focus in my role. The adaptation side, which is what my coworker focuses on, it means adapting to the changes that are going to happen. Like we know we've surpassed a certain threshold and these things are about to happen in the next, 100 years or whatever. Because some climate change is locked in, and a lot of it we still don't really know exactly what's gonna go down, but we have to start preparing for that. So that could mean like our stormwater systems in our towns, for example. If we're going to start getting more precipitation than before, so it rains either more often or harder, our stormwater systems that typically capture all of that won't be able to hold it all anymore. So we'll see flooding. And we've seen that in a lot of Canada. So in Ottawa and in Quebec, there have been more extreme floods lately. So that kind of thing. So an adaptation would be to resize those, increase the size before it's a problem, so that you're proactively adapting, right? So there's both sides of the climate change action spectrum, and they're equally important, really. We have to do both in order to survive. So the company I'm working for, Fundamental Inc., is basically trying to do both of those things, to bridge them, to make sure both of them are always considered in basically any decision that we make, because everything is tied to these two things. And if and we just want to try to move people along, so that these are considered in their planning if they're not already, whether they're a municipality or a company or just an individual person, to help, I guess, educate and say, well, this choice that you're going to make would have impacts, whether or not you originally thought about them. They will, and helping to make better choices that consider these things and help to prevent any implications in the future that we don't want. So I feel like my job couldn't get much more meaningful than that, in terms of what I am and what I wanted to be addressing. And of course, along with any climate action usually has social implications that are good. So if you're acting to improve, like climate resilience is another word people use. Resilience just meaning like the ability to bounce back from bad stuff happening. So if you're making something more climate resilient, you're also saving people, you're protecting people, you're making life better for people. So it's all connected in that way, and I really like that. I really like how everything we do is tied to that. So even if at first it doesn't seem like it is, we always make sure that it is. So that's why I like my job, why I wanted to work in this space. And the overall goal is to reduce the greenhouse gas impact that all of our actions in Newfoundland have, across the country as well, if we can get out there. We're currently focusing on business in here. But I also do feel very strongly about Newfoundland and trying to build our economy, move us away from some of the industries we've been really stuck to that may or may not be the best, or may not be sustainable long term, whether or not we think they should be. They're not. So doing the work that I'm doing will have those economic impacts as well, just to help to bring everything back to where it could be. What's a big accomplishment that I've had. And one thing that I really always comes to mind is not related to my current job, but just the process that I've taken to get here. And in the engineering program at MUN, it's co-op or cooperative. So it basically just means that you go to school, but you also have some work placements or work terms. So every second term, you basically get a job. You do the interviews and you are hired and you get a job for 4 months. So a lot of people get jobs in the province, often with the oil and gas companies or with construction companies that are local. And there are a decent number of opportunities depending on the year and how the economy is going. But what I decided after doing a few work terms here, which were good work terms, had good experiences, I realized that I really wanted to try to get on this renewable energy climate change path. So like, okay, well, how am I going to do that? Because there are some companies here doing stuff. The company I'm working with now didn't exist back then. So I decided, well, I'm gonna try to find something. So I was looking for work terms in Ontario, and I had a big spreadsheet going of like all the companies in Ontario that were doing something that I liked. And then all the contact people and whether I'd contacted them and what day that was, and if I heard back and all these things. And I had a few interviews, but it was taking a long time. And what was stressful about it was that in order to make sure that I didn't end up with a job I didn't want, I didn't apply to anything I didn't want. So because I had tried to do the term before, where I was contacting companies in other places in Canada, but also just applied for the regular jobs here, and I got one. So I was like, oh, okay, well, like my plan didn't work because I couldn't turn down this job, and I didn't really get a chance to fully explore the other opportunities. So this time I was like, okay, nope, like even when it's getting down to the wire, because there's a certain time you have to get a job by. So I said, well, I really want to do this, so I'm not going to apply to all the other jobs, the ones that I would probably get. I'm just going to focus on this, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But that was difficult because I didn't have the security of knowing what was going to happen, and I could have ended up not doing anything for 4 months, which I didn't want to do. It doesn't, you're allowed to miss a work term in the program. It's not like you're kicked out or anything. But I didn't want that to happen. So anyway, I did get the job that I wanted. So that was quite, like, if that felt like a big moment. I had never thought about going anywhere else other than Newfoundland. I never really gave it much thought. I just thought like, oh yeah, I'll, make my connections here because I want to end up working here long term. So, what's the point is kind of how I thought at first. But it really did kind of change everything. So I had that experience of living away for a few months, met like great people, a new friend. It was a startup company. So that was cool. It was a startup wind energy company. So they were designing a system for wind turbines that like improved them. So that was just like a super cool thing to be doing. And it was very hands-on. I was in the workshop, actually building the components for this device, also doing stuff with computer programs. It was just super cool. And like, I was very uncomfortable to start that process and to do that. But it ended up just being so great. And then I actually got my second work term at a different company in the same area, based on the fact that I had done all that research the first time. So yeah, I would call that one of my bigger accomplishments that I'm proud of. And I guess the lesson would be to, as soon as you can, start trying to chase the path that you want, because it does matter. So people will, because your work experience is really what people look at the most when you're applying for actual jobs later. So the fact that I've worked in renewable energy just makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about more. The first thing I would say is that engineering is not easy. So you have to be somewhat prepared for that. Knowing how to study is really important, and practicing now is important. So people who really had not a good studying regime still can get by. Like, you can figure it out quickly and get through. But for me, like, I was so used to really overstudying. Like, I studied way too hard my whole life. Probably partly due to anxiety, I don't know. But it really did help. Like, I didn't find it that bad compared to some people to transition that way, because I was used to like continuous like review. So that really is important, and your grades are important. It's not that hard to get, like, they accept a lot of people into engineering in the first year, but they weed you out pretty quick. So it's difficult for a reason. Like, they want to know kind of if you can handle it, because the classes get continuously smaller until definitely halfway through you're still losing people. So it's not like everybody can get through and do engineering. But it's also not impossible. Like, there are people who, didn't get 90s all the way through high school and they still, make it through. But you do need to have relatively high marks. Also, if you don't like physics and math, if you're not good at physics and math, then don't do engineering, because you really need to like that stuff, because that's what you're doing most of the time. It's math. And you do have to be somewhat good at it, because you'll really struggle. So unless you're really, really motivated and you are open to extra tutors and all the extra time it takes to understand something, if it doesn't come naturally to you, it's going to be hard. So I think that matters. A lot of people, and I've thought this forever, but people often say, like, you can do whatever you put your mind to. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think we all have specific skills and like abilities and traits that make us more suited to certain things. So just be honest with yourself and realize that. It doesn't mean that you can't do something that is a little difficult for you. Like, you can push through that, and it's just, things should be a little bit difficult in order to challenge yourself. But some things just aren't for certain people. Like I said, I could never be a family doctor because all the small talk would kill me. and I would not, it would not work. Like I would just be exhausted from the personal interaction. So knowing those things, not just your like academic abilities, but also just your personality, what kind of work will suit you. So not just the schooling, but in the end, the job that you're doing, does that make sense for what you like to do generally? Do you like to be at a desk? Do you like to be outside? Do you like to be with people all the time or mostly by yourself doing independent work? Like all of that matters probably the most. But in engineering, you can kind of be any of those things depending on if you want to. So, because like a lot of engineers can work in the field, it's called. So you have the hard hat and the vest, and you're, you know, watching people construct a building on site. Like that could be an engineer as well. But for me, like I'm looking at spreadsheets at my computer in my room. So there is flexibility there for engineering, but either way, you have to get through the school. So you have to be prepared for the heavy course load and the kind of the demanding projects and things that you'll have. But it's also super fun. So I don't want to scare you, but you do have to be ready for that, and don't waste like your time in high school. If you have that long-term plan, you do need to be taking all those science courses, and you do need to be like trying your best in those courses, because it will only get more difficult if you don't know that stuff inside and out. Also, take advantage of extracurricular stuff. I didn't really realize that I wanted to be involved in climate change stuff until I joined the Eco Crew, it's called. And I only joined it because someone asked me to. It's like, oh, okay. But then it kind of became my thing. So like I ended up like being the lead of that group, and most of the time at school I was cleaning out the compost bins and putting up, you know, recycling posters, and it was just like that's what I did, and that I poured a lot into that. But if I hadn't done that, I don't know what I would have been drawn to. So the stuff that you're doing outside of school is important also, and it is kind of shaping you. So all that is important, but you don't have to do everything either. So like I know there are some people who in high school, like are a member of every single club ever. And like if you like all of those things and you have the time for that, sure. But you don't need to do that either. Just do the things you like, and you can quit stuff if you don't like stuff. So I find you can also get caught up with that too, like not wanting to stop doing something because it'll come across a certain way or whatever. But don't worry about that. Just do what you have time for. If you feel overwhelmed, you don't have to do it all. In terms of places you could go, like if you're interested in engineering, there's WISE NL, Women in Science and Engineering, and I think they have some programs. I don't know the details, and I don't know what's on the go now that everything is shut down a little bit. But they focus on teaching people about engineering and other sciences. So along with this organization, they probably have some resources. And if you know anyone who has done engineering, just ask them about it, or other sciences or whatever. Ask people why they do what they do. That's kind of the best way to find out, really. And I find with engineering, it's so conceptually difficult to understand what it is, because it can be so many things. So like I don't know if I even really knew what engineering was when I started engineering. And you don't really find out soon enough. Like in the program, you start with like, you know, you're doing physics and chemistry and math courses and all these basic fundamental stuff. And you start doing some engineering courses, like a little bit of circuits and a little bit of statics and dynamics, which has to do with structures that move or don't move. But at least when I was going through, it was still kind of uncertain. But they're actually changing the program a little bit. So I know that now there's a course that you do early on that's called Thinking Like an Engineer, which sounds cool. I don't know what they do exactly. It's new since I was there, but that might be changing, where you kind of get a better idea of what you're in for right away. But I'm sure there's lots on YouTube or the internet in general that explains like what engineering is and what it can be. And I think that's worth looking at. It can help you just to understand. Yeah, so another skill that it seems totally unrelated, but it's up in my all the time, is graphic design. So totally like artsy, not anything to do with engineering. Didn't learn it in engineering. I learned it from my brother for a Skills Canada competition. So if you haven't heard of Skills Canada, you can check that out too. It's another organization, and they promote similar stuff, careers in skilled trades, which is a whole other option that you can look at. Graphic design is one of those. But anyway, I learned that skill and I competed for a while. But what I didn't realize is that I would be using it so often at work. So I used it in school too, a little bit, not a lot, to make stuff look nice, like make a project look nice. But, and I guess I should explain what graphic design is a little bit. It's just basically anything you see that's printed. So it could be like a cereal box or a book cover or a billboard or a poster for a movie, or and some stuff online too, like the interfaces of your apps or websites or whatever, logos. That's what graphic designers do. They make all that stuff. Anything that uses text and pictures to relay some sort of message is graphic design. So anyway, I learned that, and now I'm using that all the time. So I'm making infographics a lot. So like, for example, my company has just been thinking very generally lately about like, how can we make Newfoundland better and make more, use like all the natural resources that we have in terms of energy. So for example, we're going to have a lot of renewable energy actually already, like with the hydropower that we have. So like, how could we use that to do something cool? So I was trying to show like how we could produce hydrogen fuel, which is something else you can look up if you want. But you need a lot of energy to make hydrogen. So I like had to make that look interesting, and like understandable to someone without that much scientific background. So anyway, I used Adobe Illustrator, which is the program that I learned, to make a nice little flow chart with little images to show how that could possibly work. And it's a fun thing to do, and it's a skill that I add to the company that another engineer might not. So the extra things that you're doing could be useful, even if they don't seem relevant. So like I knew even when I was learning graphic design that I wasn't going to be a graphic designer. I didn't want to only do that. But it is useful. It's a transferable skill, I guess, that you can use for lots of things. What I've been working on for the most part, so I said that I'm a climate change mitigation coordinator, but I didn't really say what that means at all. So I did mention mitigation basically translates to greenhouse gases. That's the only way you can mitigate climate change. So one of the things I've been doing is doing greenhouse gas inventories, also called greenhouse gas accounting. So basically just trying to figure out what emissions are actually happening due to whatever. So for example, a lot of our clients are municipalities. So looking at all the town-owned buildings, so the town hall and the pool and the library and whatever, taking all the electricity information from there, whether there's furnace oil burned in a facility or propane used in equipment, or how much gas the fleet uses in their garbage trucks and all of that stuff. And then calculating what that means in terms of carbon dioxide emissions or methane emissions. So then we just know. So the first step of tackling anything is to know what you're looking at. So like, for example, one of the things that most people don't realize is for a typical town, like the greatest source of emissions is your solid waste. So all the garbage that everybody puts out, that gets trucked to the landfill, and in the landfill is where we're getting a lot of our emissions. So when stuff breaks down in an environment without oxygen, it releases methane, particularly organic material. So that's why we like to compost. Composting is actually has a lot of greenhouse gas impacts. So I can get in, that's a whole other thing. But part of my job is to identify that. So a town probably doesn't realize that. We tell them, like, you can reduce your greenhouse gas emissions by this much if all the residents compost. And they're like, oh, they just, wouldn't have known that. And we can also show how, like, if you switch this building from being powered by furnace oil to a heat pump, like an electric heat pump, you'll save this many tons of carbon dioxide a year. And also, usually it's associated with some cost savings. So electricity might be cheaper than the fuel you're usually using. And in terms of solid waste, the town has to pay a certain amount of money for every ton of garbage that they put in the landfill. So if we reduce that, the town is saving money also. So we're trying to show them, by doing this inventory of their assets, that you can save this much money and this many greenhouse gases if you just do these few simple things. So then from that, we make climate action plans. That's what we've been calling them. And basically they just highlight all of those things, like all the actions they can take that have a greenhouse gas impact. But we also consider the adaptation stuff. So we might recommend that they look into their stormwater system because it's probably old and it probably doesn't have the capacity for increased rainfall that we're expecting under climate change projections. So that's the big thing I've been doing, mostly for municipalities, but also for some organizations and companies.
Are any of your audits, or I've always called them or heard them called audits?
It basically is an audit, yeah.
Yeah. Are any of those, or even the infographic you talked about, is any of that public? Like, would I be able?
I could show the company, because I did the company greenhouse gas inventory, which is very small because it's like 2 people in their houses. But that's there. It's on our website already, but I can send it to you. The infographic thing, what's actually cool about that is we sent it to the province. So I forget who it was, Department of Natural Resources, maybe other people too. So my boss is kind of getting well known in the like renewable energy space. So they actually asked her for like advice on like how do we use all the electricity that we're generating, because nobody wants to buy it as the electricity. Like Quebec won't buy our Muskrat Falls, that's the issue. Like we have all this energy and we can't sell it. So like what else can we do with it to make it, like how can we export it in another way? So that's where we came up with like this hydrogen idea, or like if we really pushed on electrification of vehicles, we could use so much of it there. Or I did another one for agriculture. So like if we invested a shit ton in composting facilities and greenhouses, like you would use a lot of the energy and then you would, create all these other things that are good for the province. So I don't know if I could show you that or not. I can ask Ashley though, she'll tell me. And I'm working on I have to do another diagram today about another project. But that would be cool.
Yeah, just check.
I'll see if I can find something. Otherwise, like what I did for the company is fine. And it's a little graphic-y, not a lot, but that's already on the website, so that's public anyway.
Perfect. Yeah, so just check on the other things. If not, then
yeah,
fine either way, of course. But
yeah,
it sounds, interesting to me personally. But I think the girls really attached to it too. Hopefully, so I feel in general that environmentalism is pretty on point right now in terms of what interested in going into, whereas maybe there's less people interested in, I'm gonna work for oil and gas.
Yeah, like I found it weird that even in my class people took the petroleum stream. I thought that was weird. Like, how can you think that right now? And like I did one work term at Husky because I wanted to prove to myself that it would suck, and it did. And I was like, you know what, I'll take your $26 an hour for 4 months, just one time.
Yeah.
So I did it. And like, it was kind of like, I understand a little bit more of the lingo about what, like offshore. like, it's good to know, I guess. But even when I was there, like the person, one of my supervisors said, like, we're all going to be out of work soon enough. Like he knew that. They all know that. So it was interesting to see that, like from the inside. But yeah, like in my circles, like everyone's kind of pumped about how COVID has screwed up everything so much because it's like the best opportunity we'll ever have to actually change stuff. So like there's a big push to basically push on everybody, like government in general, and say like, now's the time. You need to invest in something. So why not this? Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly has created so many opportunities actually. Like,
Hmm.
can't love it, but also it's kind of great.
Yeah.
Like even the fact that I can have a doctor's appointment by phone.
Yeah.
Like we've been talking for years about how our
Yeah.
health system is too taxed and doesn't have enough doctors, enough nurses, etc. And friends
Yeah.
Scotia are like, what do you mean you can't just get a shot from a nurse? Like if you needed a
Yeah.
nurses in Nova Scotia will do that.
Yeah.
Here we have to go to a doctor. But yeah,
Yeah.
so there are a lot of silver linings.
Yeah.
And I guess we can only say that because we are in Newfoundland and we are lucky
Yeah.
for a low caseload and all
Yeah.
of those things. But I'll
Yeah.
take silver linings.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
Anyway, that's
Okay. I think
the size of
that's all.
Are you
You
sorry?
you cut out a bit. I didn't hear you.
Oh, I said that's about the size of it.
Okay.
Are you headed up to the plant out tomorrow morning?
I don't think so because I have something that I have to get done. So I don't know. I'd like to, but we'll see how my progress is today.
It's all good. I can't make it, so I was
Yeah.
just asking.
Yeah. I would like to.
I
Yeah.
picked up some chicken manure, so that'll be Sunday anyway.
Mhm. Cool.
Anyway, so we'll probably see you Sunday, I imagine.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much again,
Oh,
Emma.
no problem. Hopefully it all sounds all right. Laid back.
Yes. We'll have some fun. Yeah. All right. Well, you have a good day, and I hope your next project you're working on goes well.
Thanks.